What is happening, guys? It's your boy TC back with another video. So today we're talking transfers yet again. Of course, we know that we need additions to our team. The manager has recently come out and confirmed that Arsenal will not be able to make permanent signings within this transfer window. We know that the January window is of course an inflated market, so players are essentially overpriced within this particular market, but it doesn't take away from the fact that we need some form of injection within the team itself. Let it be fresh blood, which is what we will be discussing today in the form of transfers. But I believe there's a legitimate reason why we're not able to actually sign players. Of course, this is not what we want to hear as fans. I'm not happy about the situation, of course, at the club at the moment, but there is a legitimate reason, I do believe, which I have come across in regards to why we can't make any signings. And I'm going to try and break it down as well as I can for you guys within this particular video. So it's all revolving around finances. So in terms of finances within football, it's a very, very muddy space to actually navigate. There's certain rules and stipulations and regulations that a club needs to follow. And let's not forget, football clubs are businesses. We've heard of this whole £3 million per match day that the club generates, but of course that has to go towards somewhere. It's all accounted for. So in terms of what we're speaking about in this video, it's in regards to FFP. So what's FFP? FFP is the financial fair play that's actually introduced within the football or across Europe really by UEFA back in 2011, and essentially since 2013 clubs have also been assessed against break-even requirements, which require clubs to balance their spending with their revenues and restrict clubs from accumulating debts. So essentially it's actually trying, this rule or regulation was introduced to try and avoid situations such as the Portsmouth situation where Pompey ended up getting bankrupt, nearly going into administration and all that sort of stuff. So essentially this rule was put into play. So there's certain stipulations and rules behind this whole FFP situation. Again, I'll be reading notes that I've made in regards to this video. It might be a lengthy video as such, but we'll try and break it down as well as I can. So another point really in regards to what FFP is, clubs can spend up to €5 million more than they earn per assessment period, which is every 3 years. However, it can exceed this level to a certain limit if it's entirely covered by a direct contribution / payment from the club's owners or a related party. So of course clubs have got some little bit of leeway away from that €5 million that's been mentioned. However, if they do exceed, there are penalties and fines that can certainly be involved by breaking this particular rule. So Arsenal are obviously trying to adhere to this whole FFP situation. It's a very, very tricky subject, and I've really had to read on this topic, wrap my head around it, and trying to deliver it to you guys in these videos. So the next topic really is, are owners allowed to inject money into their club? So we hear this whole Stan Kroenke is a billionaire, he's got a lot of money, he should be investing in the club and all this sort of jazz. So people try and compare us. Let's use Man City as an example. Man City, they spend really uncapped spending. They can go out and spend X amount of money on a player. That player will end up at their club. So in terms of if owners are allowed to inject money into their club, if a club's owner injects money into the club through a sponsorship deal with a company to which he is related to, then UEFA's competent bodies will investigate and, if necessary, adapt the calculations of the break-even result for the sponsorship revenues to the level which is appropriate, which is a fair value according to market prices. So of course we have the situation with Man City, which we will talk about in terms of their sponsorship deals and how it's structured, etc. We'll talk about that shortly. Under the updated regulations, any entity that alone or in aggregate together with other entities which are linked to the same owner or government represent more than 30% of the club's total revenue is automatically considered a related party. So what about Man City? So we know Man City is owned by the Abu Dhabi family. They alone, that particular family alone, have investments around the world valued at about £1 trillion, which is a hell of a lot of money, ladies and gentlemen. I can't even begin to envision what £1 trillion would look like, but they are owned by that particular family. So of course there's a lot of talk around the footballing world really that suggests that Man City are cheating these rules. What they've been doing over the years is So we know Etihad is an airline or company that's associated with the Abu Dhabi family, and of course Man City recently signed an £80 million per season deal with the Etihad, and of course that will bring in a lot of money. So over 5 years, that's £400 million, ladies and gentlemen. That company alone is associated to that family. However, it's a separate entity. It will be classed as its own business, and they can inject money indirectly through that Etihad sponsorship. Of course, this is also then based on market value of that team, of course. So Manchester City has recently won the league in recent years. Even last season, of course, they won the league. So UEFA would have looked at that and said, well, that £80 million is equivalent to Man City's market value, what they can demand from sponsors. So of course we will be signing a £50 million per season deal with Adidas moving forward, and we also did have a huge deal in place with the Emirates in terms of the shirt sponsorships, etc. That was in place, but that's how Manchester City gets around that little regulation there. So there is a loophole there that they're obviously exploiting and exposing, but that doesn't take away from the fact that they will earn an additional £30 million per season from this particular sponsorship deal. Because essentially the average for a top team, if you want to call it that, would be roughly about the £50 million mark or the £60 million mark. So they could roughly get away with an additional 20 to £30 million a season, which is obviously income that's guaranteed over a period of time. Then they can go ahead and inject that into transfers. So that's the Man City situation in comparison to us. However, we were tied into this Puma deal, which wasn't paying a lot of money. Of course, we've renegotiated with Adidas, and of course the Emirates deal is coming to an end, and that has been renegotiated as far as I'm aware, and that's going to bring in additional revenue. But the key factor here is, since we've fallen out of the Champions League, so it's been 2 seasons now since we've fallen out of the Champions League, bearing in mind we had these cheap sponsorship deals, if you want to call them that, in place when we fell out of the Champions League, it meant that our revenue significantly decreased. Of course, we've ended up going out spending heavily on wages as well, and these will count towards that FFP. So we've bought in Aubameyang, we've also signed Mesut Ozil to a huge bumper contract, and then we've also bought in Mkhitaryan on a huge bumper contract. So the 2-season drop into the Europa League and relatively static sponsorship revenue, which we've spoken about already, has been the biggest hindrance to free spending in the transfer market for Arsenal, as we have already touched on already. It leaves us close to the standard wage growth of a £7 million cap per season. The exact amount Arsenal is allowed to spend for this season is still unclear, of course, as the club hasn't published the finances for 2018. So we won't know. Of course, this transfer window is going to be gone. We have found ourselves forced to spend high on wages, as mentioned as well, in the last 12 months, with a new contract for Mesut Ozil, high wages for both January 2018 arrivals, which was Mkhitaryan and Aubameyang, and a summer window that saw at least 5 players join the club. So that's all contributed to the allowance that the club has in regards to this whole FFP situation. Despite this growth being offset by an expiring contracts of Jack Wilshere, Santi Cazorla, Per Mertesacker, Arsenal are operating at tight to their allowance for each yearly growth. This is drastically limited by the ability to spend in this January transfer market on players without requiring the sell or loan of players already in the side. So again, we need to sell in order for us to bring in order for us to balance the books. It's a very tricky subject to talk about. I'm hoping I'm doing this justice in terms of actually delivering the information to you guys. In order to increase the standard annual £7 million boost to their wage bill, which is Arsenal, clubs are only allowed to use revenue from match day income, sponsorship income, or profits from player transactions. So that's where the money has to come from. The money can't be injected in from the owner. So Arsenal are in a healthy financial state, including extremely huge cash reserves. There are no need of increased investment from the owner, which is Stan Kroenke, to remain FFP compliant. To put it simply, even if the American deposited £100 million into the club's accounts, it would have no practical effect on their spending power in January. So our hands are tied. Even if Stan Kroenke wanted to invest, our hands are tied due to this whole FFP situation. So it's, as I said, very tricky. I'm not justifying the situation we find ourselves in, but this is a legitimate reason in terms of why we can't go out in the market and actually spend this month. We'd all love to be bringing in players, 60, 70 million pound players, but essentially due to the rules in place, the club can't go ahead and do that. I will place a link in the description for this particular article that I got this information from. The individual who wrote this article clearly broke it down. And of course, as fans, we're very fickle, including myself. We want results now. I want results now. And I want to see players coming into the club. And essentially, that's not going to be the case. So you have to look at this from a rational point of view, to actually sit down and actually look at the information that is available. And this is all factual, ladies and gentlemen. This is not made up information. It's all factual. So up until the summer, when the new deals come in, then our spending power then should increase, as well as the fact that if we find ourselves back into the Champions League, let it be through the Europa League or qualifying through the top 4, again, our spending power will increase. So let's be patient. Let us be patient. Unai Emery has been with the club for only 6 months, and I can see a lot of people calling for his head. But this is a situation out of everyone's control within the club. It's going to be an extremely difficult 6 months coming up. But I do believe in the summer, hopefully we can get back into the Champions League. And then in the summer, we can go out and spend and spend and spend and spend and bring the quality players that we do want in to come into the club. But again, as I said, I hope I've done this topic justice in terms of trying to explain it in a way that you guys can decipher. I've sort of tried to decipher it in a way that I can understand it myself, and then I've tried to relate it back to you guys. But as usual, please do let me know what you think in the comments below. If you are watching this video and you're not subscribed to the channel, please do make sure that you do hit that subscribe button. So once again, guys, it's your boy TC from I'm Gonna Talk TV, and I'm out.